With Cedar Point opening Siren's Curse, their 18th roller coaster, all of us are now wondering what type of coaster could come next, and most importantly, where could Cedar Point build it? Would you believe me if I told you that Cedar Point has 5 places that are still available for them to build their next roller coaster? And you're probably thinking, well, the Corkscrew plot of land and the Gemini plot of land. Well, to make this video a little bit more interesting, these 5 locations do not require the removal of an existing roller coaster. In order from least likely to the likeliest to go along with my thoughts as to what type of coaster would be perfect for that location. My name is Theme Park Brandon, and this video series I first started doing way back in 2020 when I first started the channel, so I'm really excited to kind of bring it back in a new spin, a new twist 5 years later. So Cedar Point is obviously the roller coaster mecca. This place is surrounded by Lake Erie, and in my opinion, there's no other park out there, at least here in America, that is as good at fitting new rides into the park, making the ride feel like it belongs in the park and just look good overall. With that being said, the first location is this area highlighted right here, located right in between the Midway Games and Gatekeeper. Now, as you can see, this is a backstage area of the park, so whatever they build here, if they would ever do it, they're going to have to remove and relocate a lot of different backstage area things like warehouses, parking, maintenance areas, etc. So I am a little bit intrigued by this plot of land because I would love to be able to walk down the main Midway and look to my right and see another coaster in between you and Gatekeeper. I think that would look really cool on the Cedar Point skyline and walking down throughout this area of the park. But I'm going to share with you 3 pros and 3 cons for each location, and my 3 biggest pros for this area would be you add yet another major coaster to the front of the park, because right now you only have Raptor and Gatekeeper now that Wicked Twister is gone, and some could argue Valraven, but I think Valraven's more towards like the center area of the park in my opinion. So adding a major coaster to this plot of land would really draw more people from the back of the park in particular all the way to the front of the park and just give this whole area more of a buzz feel. I mean, Gatekeeper, it's hard to believe, but Gatekeeper is over 10 years old. Cedar Point installed their B&M coaster in 2013. So I would really like to see a new coaster being added to the front of the park. Now another pro at this location is bringing more revenue in for all the Midway games as you see right here. So by adding yet another marquee attraction that's going to be located near these games, you're just going to draw a lot more foot traffic in front of them and people stopping off and playing them, which means increased revenue. And the third pro with this location would be another attraction in the front of the park being open for early entry, which is always a good thing for Cedar Point for marketing purposes, especially with that season pass. Now let's talk about the cons. And obviously number 1 would be relocating the warehouses. And I don't really know what goes in those buildings right there, like what they're used for, but they're going to have to be removed. And that's never really a good thing, especially when it comes to Cedar Point, since it's surrounded by water. You just can't just build it 100 feet to the west or to the east. You're going to have to relocate it somewhere else, either on the peninsula or the mainland. So my question is, whatever's located in these warehouses behind the games and in the center building located right here, could it be relocated to the mainland, or does it have to be next to the park? Another con would be no trees are in this vicinity of the park at all, so whatever they would have to build, they would definitely have to add some landscaping, some grass, some trees. And right now, walking down the Midway, you see all the Midway games, kind of blocks the eyesore this area of the park is in regards to the backstage area. So whatever they do here, if they would ever remove all this for a new coaster, I think they would definitely need to bring in some mature trees to really make it look better overall and more appealing. And the third con kind of ties in with the first one and that is removing more backstage areas. There's only so much a park can remove off property, and for that reason alone is why I'm giving this location the least likeliest for a new coaster in the future. And the perfect coaster for this location would be a Gerstlauer Infinity Coaster. Now think something like Hang Time at Knott's Berry Farm, but a little bit taller, a few more inversions, maybe an airtime hill or two, located right here as you can see. And another thing about this is any type of coaster that they could be adding to this area, the park might not even have to relocate the warehouse at all, but something like a Gerstlauer Infinity Coaster in this plot of land, as you're walking down the main midway, especially at night with those great lighting packages, would just look so awesome. And I would just absolutely, it would really just liven up and give this front of the park a vibe that it currently doesn't have. Now the next coaster location that I'm going to talk about is right here next to Blue Streak, where you can see all the picnic pavilions are located. Now obviously Cedar Point uses some of these, but not that often really. So I would see one get removed to make way for the station, transfer track, maintenance area, queue line entrance, etc. Now here's where things get really interesting, and I love this concept so much that I actually created a video that you can see at the bottom of your screen right here, where I share with you a detailed breakdown of just how Cedar Point could build the world's tallest, longest, fastest full circuit Giga coaster in this location, and I give you guys really good reasonings as to why it would make sense for Cedar Point to add a B&M Giga to pair with their Intamin Giga Millennium Force. Now let's talk about the pros about this location, and that is really number one, you have a limited amount of room if you go into the parking lot. Again, there's so many different types of rides and coasters and sizes that could fit inside this plot of land, so I'm really intrigued by this, especially if Cedar Point did go Giga. Pro number two is this would be a skyline game changer. Driving down the Cedar Point Causeway and looking out and seeing this massive roller coaster right in front of the park going out into the parking lot, I think it would look really cool personally. And number three, as you're riding the coaster, you're going to get breathtaking views unlike any other ride at Cedar Point of Lake Erie. So I'm really intrigued by this plot of land. And as for the cons, well, you're going to remove some parking spots. And if you have not been to Cedar Point recently, you know this park gets packed, especially on weekends. So removing parking spots is something that I do not see the park doing, unfortunately. Now to make way for some new parking spots, maybe they could be creative. Maybe they could build a smaller parking garage, which costs a lot of money, but I'm saying maybe it's a possibility down the road. Con number two would be reconfiguring the parking lot in some way to fit in this style of ride. Whether it's a Giga or some other type of coaster, you're going to have to spend a lot of money reconfiguring the parking lot and how the traffic flows upon entering the parking lot, and especially at night on exiting the parking lot when there's a lot of traffic. And con number three would be it's just parking lots. So whatever type of coaster that the park would add out here, they would definitely need to add a bunch of landscaping and trees to really make this coaster not feel like a parking lot coaster. Now as for the perfect coaster for this location, well of course I already mentioned it, the world's longest, tallest, fastest B&M Giga coaster, I just think it makes the most sense, and I think there's a slight chance, who knows, that Cedar Point could do that. Now I have some really exciting news for you, and that is recently I uploaded around 10 to 12 new pieces of merch to keepridingcoasters.com, so you definitely want to check out all my new artwork, and for your convenience you can find it in t-shirts, hoodies, women's, kids, tank tops, you name it. Again, check out keepridingcoasters.com, and I really do appreciate all the support. Location number three would be right between Mean Streak and Gemini. And this area right here just really has me so curious as to what will it look like 10 years, even 15 years down the road, because I do think it's primed for a new attraction of some kind, especially a roller coaster. And as for the pros, well, obviously, this is a really large piece of real estate that Cedar Point could really benefit on from having a new coaster being located here. Pro number two is the prime location. It's located right between Steel Vengeance and Gemini, and the entrance plaza can be located just to the right of the restrooms, right near Slingshot. And pro number three is, this would really round out the back of the park coaster-wise, and depending on how tall this coaster is, I really feel like it's going to really look cool on the skyline, at least in the back of the park. Now as for the cons, well, we would see yet another removal of a maintenance building in the sign shop. I think the sign shop's still there. So again, that's a big piece of real estate for a potential development for a new attraction. But would Cedar Point really want to relocate the maintenance building there and the sign shop to somewhere else on property or the mainland? Again, I highly doubt it, but who knows? If anything, I definitely see a coaster going here over the front of the park in between Gatekeeper and the Midway games. Con number two, due to the size and basically the shape of this plot of land, you're really going to narrow down the type of coasters that can fit in this area. So that is a slight con. And con number 3 would be the noise issues depending on the ride type for Lighthouse Point, the park's campground and cabin rental area. So whenever the park adds a ride closer to that area, they really have to take into consideration just how loud those rides are due to people sleeping in and staying at Lighthouse Point. Now the perfect coaster for this location, I think a Vekoma flying coaster would be phenomenal here. Something like FLY over at Fantasia Land, multiple launches, great theming. Something like that would just do so well for Cedar Point and just be so marketable for the park. In this area, I just feel like it'd be really cool flying throughout the layout in between Steel Vengeance and Gemini. Heading back towards the front of the park for the 4th location, the Kiddie Kingdom area. Now I've said in past videos, all these kid rides here, they need to get ripped out and some of the best ones relocated somewhere else. But nonetheless, this area could be home to a brand new coaster of some type, and that is pro number 1. Get rid of a lot of the older kiddie rides that take a lot of money to staff every single day, and most of the rides in this area are so old, and no offense, they kind of all do the same exact thing. Pro number 2 is Cedar Point can expand the boardwalk section of the park with a coaster in this area, and I will never complain about that because I really do love and appreciate the whole boardwalk area of the park. Cedar Point did a fantastic job on this in 2023. Pro number 3 would be whatever coaster that they build in this area would look great as you're walking down the main midway, or better yet, riding the park's sky ride attraction. Now as for the cons, well, I'm going to say obviously it's a pretty small space unless the area is expanded. I mean, one crazy idea is, what if Cedar Point would combine the first location I mentioned and this location for one new roller coaster? If they did that, then the perfect coaster, in my opinion, would be a wooden twister coaster of some kind from GCI. That would be phenomenal, and I would love to see that. Con number 2 is certain type of coasters could block the view of the boardwalk area and kind of make this area feel like it's closed off. And sadly, as much as I love the wooden coaster idea in this area, I feel like it would do just that, kind of block it off, and I don't think Cedar Point wants to do that. And con number 3 is removing some kid attractions. Unless the park can relocate the better ones somewhere else in the park, that is never a positive for any park, because a ton of families and kids visit Cedar Point every single day. The perfect coaster for this location, in my opinion, would be a brand new B&M family inverted coaster. I really love what B&M is doing with these family inverts. And we've seen Busch Gardens Tampa and Williamsburg now add these family inverts to complement the larger ones in Alpengeist and Montu. So the same scenario here would be Raptor as for the adults and the thrill seekers, then located right across the midway will be a family inverted coaster. I love it, I really do. And now it's time for location number 5. And before I share it, if you're enjoying this video, then all I ask you to do is please take 1 second and give the video a like. That is by far the best way that you can help support my channel, Theme Park Brandon, and I really do appreciate it. So location number 5, and the most likely for the park's next coaster, is obviously going to be the Snake River Falls plot of land. This place is huge. I mean, if you would pair the Millennium Island plus the plot of land where the Sky Coaster once stood to go along with the Snake River Falls area, you're talking, this is a prime real estate for the park's next coaster, and I predict that it's coming in 2028. And that is pro number 1. The best piece of real estate right now for Cedar Point is this, and there's no question about it. Pro number 2 will be that Cedar Point could easily use the Sky Coaster plot of land and or Millennium Island again to expand this whole entire plot to make it that much larger. Pro number 3 will be yet another marquee attraction being located back in the frontier area of the park. I really do love what type of theme and story that Cedar Point can create with this style of ride in this plot of land that is located back in the frontier area of Cedar Point. Now as for the cons, number 1, you are potentially using 3 plots of land for 1 major coaster. Now, could Cedar Point get away with using 1 or 2 of those plots of lands and utilizing the other one for a new flat ride or some other type of an attraction? I mean, that would not be a bad thing. Number 2, we would see the removal of more trees, which we all know that Cedar Point does not need to do. And the third con is, depending on the size of this coaster, I think we could all kiss goodbye the dream about having a midway connecting the Gemini Midway and the Frontier Trail, really making Cedar Point more accessible and easier to get around. Now, in my opinion, not prediction, but opinion for all of these, is the perfect coaster for this location would be a Mach Extreme Spinner. I would love to see that style of ride at Cedar Point, and I think a lot of us would love that as well, and having it in this plot of land would just look great. A Mach Extreme Spinner would just blend in so beautifully and perfectly in the western area of Cedar Point, and I would not complain at all if this ride would use up all three of those plots of lands. Now, if you're curious as to how I rank the coasters at Cedar Point from worst to best, then you're not going to want to miss the video at the bottom of your screen, because I think you're going to be rather shocked. With that being said, what are your thoughts on my 5 locations that Cedar Point could build a new coaster? And what other parks do you want to see me do this video series on? You know what to do. Let me know in the comments. This is Theme Park Brandon. Thank you so much for watching. Remember to smile today, think positive, and of course, keep riding coasters.